Aguá. Hey, pura vida, mi gente. Shabbat Shalom. Hope you guys are having a great, strong beginning. Not a weekend, a strong beginning, right? On the Sabbath, Shabbat. We're gonna get back into a book we were reading about a year ago, and we just didn't continue reading it. There was a lot of drop in this book, you know, and things I was supposed to follow up on and do individual videos on, and I haven't. But that's why, I wanted you guys to remember the book, and let's go ahead and finish reading it. We're gonna continue where we left off. Appreciate everybody that's tuned in, everybody in the live chat. Thank you for coming. Anybody that came later to watch, appreciate you too, taking the time to watch this video, hear me read. All right. I have a physical copy, so I'm not able to show the pages, but I'm gonna read them to you, just like we've been doing it with this book in the last three parts. All right. And this is 1 second. This is the book we're gonna get into again. It's The Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake. Wisconsin's Sunken Civilization. There's other covers. Again, this is from Frank Joseph. And yeah, a lot of people you guys complain about the author, who he is, who's associated with. So we're not really worried about him, but the information that we can verify and that he's presented. And we read so much drop on this book. It's not even about the author, because we've already proven a lot of the stuff he said. So when we're talking about America being the true old world and how all these authors, these Atlantis researchers and uh, ancient one world civilization researchers, they like to see things in reverse and say people came to the Americas and then build all this stuff, right, and then left again. What happened to them? They disappeared, right? But again, we're going to continue where we left off in chapter 4 of this book. All right. If you guys don't mind, just 1 second. All right. I just want to say hi to the people, guys. Pura vida, mi gente. Pura vida. You like the thumbnail? Pretty cool, right? Got the little pyramid in the back. All right. It's somewhere there. It's behind me. How you guys doing? We're gonna get into this book, right? Again, got the physical copy. All right. Rock Lake Pyramids, Wisconsin's Lost Civilization. All right. I'm going to chapter 14. Chapter 14. Hold on. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Yeah. Now we're gonna go to chapter 14, guys. The shades, yeah. The 3D, that's the filter. That's not, they're not real. Yeah. We're gonna go to chapter 14 of this book, right? But before we do that, because the chapter starts, okay, don't expect to just read about with the sunken pyramids. It did a lot of that in the previous chapters, so it goes off topic, but it actually connects everything to Rock Lake. Chapter 14 is called the Serpent People, and it goes into, like, a lot of the mythology and biblical stories and stuff. And so it mentions Cadmus, right? Cadmus, and so I don't have to just like explain what I'm talking about. I'm just gonna show you guys kind of what Diodorus of Sicily said about Cadmus, who he was, who his people was, so we can have a better context when they're mentioning Cadmus, the so-called Phoenician, right? So so again, this is from my video, Israel and the Nations of Europe. playlist. I got 3 or 4 parts of that. We're in part 1 of that video. We're about 55, 56 minutes in. It's a 2.5 hour video, but I'm just going to show a quick part I'm reading here again from the book of Diodorus of Sicily. Supposedly, right, is an ancient so-called Greek scholar. All right. You know, might go off topic a little bit, but it might be on topic, right? We're also going to give people time to join if they haven't joined yet. All right. And again, this is the pre-mount. You know how we got the dismount? This is the pre-mount. All right, let's go. The works of Diodorus of Sicily. Yeah, the famous Diodorus they always quote, right? The Greek historian. We're going right into volume 12. All right, and we're going to be reading from book 40, the last book and the last chapter. All right, so we belly flop to this part of the book on book 40 where Diodorus basically gives his overview of the history of the Hebrews, right? And the reason he does that is because he's going to show the relationship between the ancient Greeks and these so-called Jews or Hebrews. It says here, now that we are about to record the war against the Jews, we consider it appropriate to give first a summary account of the establishment of the nation from its origins and of the practices observed among them. When in ancient times a pestilence arose in Egypt, the common people ascribed their troubles to the workings of a divine agency. For indeed, with many strangers of all sorts dwelling in their midst and practicing different rites of religion and sacrifice, their own traditional observances in honor of the gods had fallen into disuse. Hence, the natives of the land surmised that unless they removed the foreigners, their troubles would never be resolved. All right? So Diodorus is talking about literally the plagues of Egypt that we read about in the Bible. You know, what we read about Moses doing with the help of the Most High, with the staff and everything, so that Pharaoh can let his people go. Now, the way Diodorus is writing about it, he's saying there was a pestilence and that they were causing trouble to the native population, the Egyptians, right? Descendants of Mizraim and Cush. He don't mention that they were actually enslaving these other people that they wanted to get rid of. We know the other side of the story. So they wanted to get rid of the so-called Jews or Hebrews, right? These foreigners in Egypt. At once, therefore, the aliens were driven from the country, and at the most outstanding and active among them banded together, and, as some say, were cast ashore in Greece and certain other regions. So listen to what Diodorus is letting you know, that during the Exodus, right? Literally, this is what he's talking about. They weren't driven out from the country. They left. They rebelled and freed themselves from bondage out of Egypt. They left to help with the Most High. And Diodorus is letting you know that during this Exodus, right? So let me know if you guys have a high-pitched sound. Hopefully not. Hopefully the sound is working. Of the Israelites, Hebrews, they banded together, and some say were cast ashore in Greece and certain other regions. Their leaders were notable men, chief among them being Danaus. Okay, Danaus. Danaus in Greek mythology was the king of Libya. His myth is a foundation legend of Argos, whose the Argives is Danites too, as one of the foremost Mycenaean cities of the Peloponnesus and Homer's Iliad. Danan's tribe of Dan, or Danaus, the Argives. Again, Danaus and the Danans are the Danites. They did come out of the Exodus. And also Cadmus, yes, the historical, mythical Cadmus, right? In Greek mythology, Cadmus was the legendary Phoenician founder of Boeotian Thebes, the founder of Thebes, okay? Cadmus, an exiled Israelite. I'm not the one saying that. Diodorus is telling us Danaus and Cadmus, they're supposed to be mythical people, half gods. And like I've been showing you, these Greeks turned a lot of these antediluvian people characters into gods and created a mythological story about their origins. But again, Phoenician Cadmus? Who's the Phoenicians? Remember my Nations of the World day and night video? So who are the Phoenicians? You always got to really study that. Get specific when they're saying Phoenician. Either way, Phoenicia, the land of Phoenicia, was in Canaan, the promised land. That was in America. You already know these people wore feather crowns. We got that on the last video. So Diodorus is letting you know, again, they became leaders and notable men. These people coming out of the Exodus from Egypt, these Israelites, like Danaus and Cadmus. But the greater number were driven into what is now called Judea, which is not far distant from Egypt and was at that time utterly uninhabited. The colony was headed by a man called Moses, outstanding both for his wisdom and for his courage. So who are we talking about? Judea, Moses, people coming out of Egypt, same people that Danaus and Cadmus came out of. This is Diodorus letting you know, supposedly in the 1st century BC, according to their hijacked chronologies, right? But they're letting you know still who these people are. Again, confirming what we've been already going over. On taking possession of the land he founded, remember that it wasn't Moses exactly who reached Jerusalem, but Joshua, his successor. Besides other cities, one that is now the most renowned of all, called Jerusalem. Now listen to Diodorus's telling people about Jerusalem like they've never heard about it. This is a very old primary source, letting you know who Danaos and Cadmus people are, the same people who founded Jerusalem, who followed their leader Moses, who came out of Egypt to marry the real Egypt, America, to marry. We're in the book, The Ruling Races of Prehistoric Times. All right. That was a pretty deep drop. You know, that video, it has so much drop. That series has so much stuff. That drop is heavy. Israel and the nations of Europe. Make sure to catch that playlist. All right, if you haven't. 1 second, guys. Right. Let me know. We're gonna get started on the reading. Okay. Wow. So we're in chapter 14 again of the book, The Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake, part 4. Why was I talking about Cadmus? Because they start mentioning him here right away. All right, now we got a background. We know who Cadmus people are, right? Did you guys pay attention? All right. Okay. So chapter 14. Let me know if at any moment the music is too loud, guys. I'll go ahead and put it down. Wow. Actually, just real quick before I begin, because we got a lot of people here. This is the playlist right here. All right, I just created it today. Now that we got 4 parts, The Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake. If you want to catch the previous chapters, so much drop. All right, so much drop. All right, I posted on the community wall the playlist in case you can't find it. Go to my community wall. And just to remind you, in the very last chapter, they were talking about the Canary Islands and the dogs and its relationship to Rock Lake and the copper culture coming out of ancient America and some tribes out of South America, the Canari. There was actually a tribe in Ecuador called the Canari in Ecuador and Peru. And so much drop on that. It's pretty crazy. We're going to do some videos on that. But he was relating also Tirahana in the Canary Islands, Tirahana, right? With Tiranena. They just mispronunciation, misspelling over time. And it's related, how he's related it, you know. Tiranena's in Wisconsin, Tiranena and Tirahana. All right, and it's related to the Canary Islands. They got rock pyramids over there in the Canary Islands, as you guys can see. Like stone pyramids, right? Like almost looking like so-called Aztec, right? So-called Maya. right? And underwater in Wisconsin, the Rock Lake, as you guys can see, they they said, they look like stones, like stones, just like the ones in the Canary Islands. So that's why he was bringing it up, you know. That's why he was bringing it up. One second. Right. Wow, wow. Make sure to catch the playlist again if you haven't seen it. Okay, amazing. So chapter 14 is again the Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake, Wisconsin's sunken civilization. It says here the Serpent people. The Serpent power was one that worked the mines of Michigan for copper and England for tin, manufactured their product on their own island, and sold it or traded it for good and other products. This was by L. Taylor Hanson. That was like the intro. And he starts Cadmus was the young prince of Phoenicia, the land of purple, the biblical Canaan, all right? Where was Cadmus? People coming out of the Exodus, right? The real Tamari, the real ancient Egypt in America, the real Canaan. We got the background. Theodorus told us. So named after the exquisite purple dye manufactured from rare mollusk, the Purpura murex, found along the shores of what is now known as Lebanon. Cadmus had a sister, Europa, one who one day saw a white bull emerging from the sea. As she approached the magnificent creature, it lay down in supplication at her feet. In a playful mood, she got onto its back and bade it rise. The bull instantly stood up and dashed into the water, carrying Europa toward the setting sun. Hearing her cries for help, Cadmus set sail to rescue his sister, but the powerful bull swam too fast and was eventually lost to sight. The prince voyaged to Delphi, Apollo's supreme oracle in the Gulf of Corinth, seeking assistance from the sun god. Hespetia, a priestess who spoke for Apollo, in a trance declared that Zeus, king of all the gods, had transformed himself into the white bull in order to steal Europa, who would be none the worse for her experience. So Europa, his sister, meaning she possibly coming out of the Exodus too, right? That's his sister. Cadmus had to give up the chase, but his coming to Delphi had been part of a higher destiny. The Pythia told him to find a black cow with a white crescent moon design on its flank and follow the animal. Wherever the cow lay down, there the Phoenician was to found a new kingdom of great glory. After leaving the oracle, Cadmus did indeed find a black cow with a white crescent figure on its flank. Alone, he followed it across Greece for many days until it finally lay down in a fertile, though sparsely populated plain. He named his new country Boeotia, or land of the cow. And Boeotia is this mythical land, out in the western Atlantic, and it's been related. We've got so many studies and research to America, actually being ancient America. We recently get in that book, researches into the lost history of America, correlating all this mythology, all these people, all these so-called gods into real people from the Americas, right? Lovely as the surroundings were, he could find no fresh water. The few natives, all poor wretches, gathered around him and said others had tried to make kingdom of Boeotia or Boeotia before him, but had failed because they could not overcome a terrible snake that guarded the solitary source of fresh water in that country. Huh? Snake or dragon? Huh? We're talking about dragons. Only if Cadmus could defeat this monster could they acknowledge his kingship. Taking his spear and shield, Cadmus set out to conquer the serpent. He lost his way in the unfamiliar land at night, and so he prayed to Artemis, goddess of the moon, Apollo's sister, to guide him. In the morning, a large rabbit Cadmus pursued as potential breakfast led him straight to a tall, conical pyramid made of round, undressed stone piled up to a sharp point. A large natural spring of fresh water bubbled close by. His thrown spear felled the hare, but his cries awoke the gigantic serpentine guardian that slept within the pyramid. All right, we got a dragon guarding this pyramid. It coiled or uncoiled from its strange lair and warned the Phoenician trespasser to return home at once. Instead, Cadmus ordered the Serpent Guardian to leave the freshwater spring. So they got like a 6th century BC, they're saying, base painting of the Serpent Guardian and Cadmus. I don't know if you guys can see this. Kind of. Not really. Yeah, you can. But it's like a serpent garden, like literally a stone pyramid, right? It says, "Depart or die," hissed the monster. Second. So depart or die, hissed the monster. With that, Cadmus hurled his spear. The snake caught the lance in his jaws and snapped it in two. The creature reared its head and struck with bared fangs at Cadmus, who raised his shield just in time to save himself. Desperate for a weapon, he pulled a loose stone from the conical pyramid and hurled it with all his strength at the head of the monster, which suddenly fell prostrate and mortality wounded at his feet. And I think I know where they're going with this. Remember, we read our chapter previous that there was the whole history or story, a legend, right, of a monster sea serpent, dinosaur dragon, guarding the lost pyramids right here in Rot Lake. We got all the local stories and everything on the whole chapter, like. So I don't know if that's where they're taking it, but there's a rock stone pyramid in this lake, and it was supposedly there was a dragon. They were like, a Loch Ness monster, American one, right, in Wisconsin there, and deep sea divers and deep lake divers, experts who dive in the craziest parts in the world, says that Rock Lake is one of the scariest places to dive. They feel like they're being washed by something. They feel like the presence of something there, and a lot of people supposedly have cited it. So just a reminder again of the old chapters we've read. Okay, so you are king now, the creature said weakly. I am the last of the serpent people. So she's talking, right? That's what I'm saying. My race died out long ago. We were the first to settle this land, and I was commanded to protect our sacred spring from all intruders. Long have I fulfilled my duty. Now it is over. You fought bravely and cunningly, however, so you will make a good king. Grant me one last wish, and I will bless you. Cadmus promised to do whatever the guardian asked. After I am dead, heap up a mound of earth over my body. So the same for the hare you killed, or do the same. This will be an offering to Artemis and a memorial for this day, and of my loyalty unto death. In return, remove my fangs and plant them in the earth. They will sprout into a new race from the old. With a final hiss, the great serpent died. Cadmus raised a mound over the monster near the cone-shaped pyramid, and his freshwater spring placing the hare under another mound nearby. He then showed the guardian's fangs in the earth. Springing up in their place was a company of armored soldiers who followed his orders implicitly. Under his direction, they dismantled the conical structure and used his stones to build a citadel known as the Cadmea. He made the freshwater spring available freely to all. Then Boeotia prospered, with Thebes as its capital and the Cadmea at his palace. He also taught his people how to read and write. He married a beautiful lady, Harmonia, who bore him many noble sons and lovely daughters. After a long reign of greatness, Cadmus and his queen were both dying of old age when they were suddenly transformed into serpents. The pair left Boeotia and swam across the seas into the distant west until they arrived in the Isles of the Blessed. There they lived as monarchs over a new kingdom, raising numerous royal children. Royal, right? Remember where Cadmus was coming from, what his royal line was? We just got it earlier. Erected a tall conical pyramid of round undressed stones, similar to the structure defended by the snake guardian he had killed many years before. Together with Harmonia, he lived on to reign as the gentle king of the Fortunate Islands, or Isles. The Fortunate Isles, huh? The Cadmus myth has long been regarded by scholars as among the most historically valid of the ancient Greek stories. For example, the Cadmea or citadel made from the stones of the Serpent Guardian's rocky cone was no literary invention. Northwest of Athens, it had been thoroughly excavated and dated to the early Bronze Age. Archaeological evidence at the site indicates that Cadmea was in fact the magnificent palace and the Theban capital of a state that rivaled Argolis as the center of Mycenaean power. Moreover, the Greek alphabet did indeed originate in Phoenician letters, so-called Phoenician, right? We're talking about Paleo-Hebrew, ancient Greek, and Latin, Gaelic. All this is coming out of what we're calling so-called Hebrew or a mother tongue. What Eber spoke when he separated himself and his family from the Tower of Babel, they kept the original mother tongue, eventually being called so-called Hebrew, um, related to Aramea, Aram, which is a brother of Shem, Aramaic, but Eber actually, there was a different dialect they were speaking, but it was coming from the same source, Noah and the antediluvians. All right, don't want to get too lost here. But anyways, so in Greek tradition, this is very popular, right? So-called Greek when he's Israelite, right? We just got that in the beginning. Diodorus, so-called Greek himself, said, "Hey, this is an Israelite." He ended up here in Greece, so-called Greece. So then Greek, the so-called Phoenician letters or Hebrew, our word phonics derives from Phoenicia, creating phonics from hieroglyphics. Remember, we got a video on all that, like how they, phonetics, who brought that out from where? That's what they're called, so-called Phoenicians, but they were just a seafaring people society. And they included a lot of different peoples, not just one type of nation. Just as the Phoenician prince was supposed to have brought literacy to the early Greeks. Even the cow that led Cadmus, who named his new kingdom after the wandering bovine, is rooted in reality. The Romans adopted a practice from Greece they called the Italic Ver Sacrum, or sacred spring again, paralleling the natural spring appearing in the Cadmus myth. This was a means of dealing with overpopulation wherein an ox or a cow with significant or unusual markings was allowed to wander freely, followed by the leader of a large contingent of settlers. Wherever the animal lay down, they established a new kingdom, which was henceforward referred to as Bovianum or Oxtown. As John Plinsett explains, one of the Greek tribes that came to Thebes seems to have followed the same custom, and it is the cow which has led to the association with Europa. But it is Cadmus' historical mythic relationship to the lost civilization of Rock Lake that is most compelling. All right, here we go. Foremost among its intriguing parallels with ancient Wisconsin is the conical pyramid made of piled, undressed stones inhabited by a serpent, like as I was saying earlier. Same story as Rock Lake. With the very few exceptions mentioned below, no such structure was ever known to exist outside Rock Lake and the Canary Islands. Okay? Not forgetting the vanished examples that once dotted the landscape from Rock Lake to the mining region of the Upper Peninsula. The Canaries were known in classical times as the Isles of the Blessed or the Fortunate Isles, the distant western realm in which Cadmus was supposed to have erected his cone-shaped memorial, and where in fact a 20-foot tall cone-shaped pyramid may still be seen near the shore of or Lanzarote in the modern capital of Arrecife. Here too, as we have learned, the native Canari or Guanches maintained kingdoms. Details of the Cadmus myth draw an old world connection to pre-Columbian Wisconsin, much closer, right? Old world connection to ancient Wisconsin, right? The Serpent Guardian's conical pyramid stood beside a water source, just as the cone-shaped structure at the bottom of Rock Lake stand near natural springs. A gravel and similarly conical mound behind the former walls of Aztalan also stood close to that site's freshwater spring. Rude stone piles resembling cone-shaped pyramids although much smaller than the pyramidal structures in Rock Lake, much smaller than Rock Lake and the Canary Islands, were built by several pre-classical peoples in Europe and the Near East as markers over freshwater springs. You hear that? This is a trend in the ancient world. And where is it much bigger? In Rock Lake and the Canary Islands. The Canary Islands connected to ancient America. These are the top of mountains, Cape Verde, the Azores, Canary Islands, Madeira Island. These are the top of mountains of more land that has been, has gone under. Yeah. So that's pretty amazing right there how they're letting you know if they're doing that in Europe and ancient Asia and on much smaller scale, they got rock pyramids, conical pyramids marking freshwater springs, just like in Rock Lake, just like in the Canary Islands. A gravel and similarly conical mound behind the former walls of Aztalan. We're gonna get Aztalan is an archaeological site in Wisconsin, guys. If you guys don't know, Aztalan is a mythical land where the so-called Mexica came from their migration right into their promised land, following the uh, priest king Meshitling, also stood close to that site's freshwater spring. Rootstone piles resembling cone-shaped pyramids, although much smaller than the pyramidal structures in Rock Lake and the Canary Islands, were built by several pre-classical peoples in Europe and the Near East as markers over freshwater springs. Among the known example in the Old Testament story of the Gigel, literally a heap, a conical pile of stones taken from the river Jordan by the Hebrews to mark the precise spot where they crossed over into the promised land. All right, we talking about what we talking about? You think we talking about the one they named Jordan over there, or we talking about ancient Utah Jordan River that comes out of a freshwater lake, which is the Utah Lake, or what the Mormons call the Sea of Galilee. They called the Utah Lake the Sea of Galilee, the Mormons when they settled there. And so that's a freshwater uh, lake or body of water, which got the Jordan River that empties into the Salt Lake City lake or Salt Lake, which means the Dead Sea. That's a Dead Sea, just like the biblical location I described, the fresh water, and then the Jordan empties into a Dead Sea. And we're talking about Mount Nebo, Moab, like all the names of Deuteronomy 34 right there. Check out the video. Shout out to Drop, you know. Hey man, it's it's there. We're talking about. So don't picture that as we're reading, because again, these people they explain things in reverse. You know. Okay. So where are we? Where are we here? So yeah, the Jordan River. They have it there marked. So too, the stones used to build the rock lake structures were retrieved from a riverbed. Among the more obscure fragmented references in the lesser known pre-classical civilization of Asia Minor, cone-shaped stone pyramids were associated with the sun and stars, recalling the known astronomical alignments of Aztalan's conical mounds. Okay, sorry, I lost my place. I had to look at somewhere. Thanks for tuning in. If you just tuned in, again, we're reading the book, The Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake. We're on chapter 14, Wisconsin's Sunken Civilization. These cogent parallels underscore the overseas connection to prehistoric Wisconsin, not necessarily with societies in the Near East or Asia Minor, but to a cultural theme that ran through the pre-classical world. Their depictions in the Old Testament and the surviving records of ancient Anatolia in Asia Minor demonstrate that the cone-shaped pyramids function on several levels simultaneously as tombs, observatories, indicators of freshwater springs, and monuments. All right. So something to think about, guys. They're saying they're finding this over there in Asia Minor, right? Asia Minor. So if there's an Asia Minor, where's Asia Major? Where's Major Asia? Asia Major, right? Or Superior. We're just talking about North America, guys. That's India Superior. Yeah, they just don't really mention that. They always say, oh, Asia Minor, Asia Major. Yeah, the farthest east. All these purposes metaphysically combine to honor the spirits of the departed with water. One second. Okay, sorry. So combine to honor the spirits of the departed with water, a universal symbol of life, to trace the recurrent motions of the heavenly bodies, another universal affirmation of immortality, and to memorialize some significant event associated with the deceased. Remarkably, all these functions associated with cone-shaped pyramids in the European ancient world and in the story of Cadmus perfectly coincide with everything understood about the conical structures under Rock Lake and on dry land and nearby Aztalan. Even more remarkable parallels to his myth appear in the earth effigy mounds just south of Rock Lake and adjoining it, in a swampy area known as Mud Lake. They portray a 4,000-foot long snake staring at a rabbit. You guys hear that? Just like the Cadmus story. The same two animals featured in the Cadmus myth. The serpentine geoglyph of Lake Mills is the largest on Earth, but it will be remembered that the monstrous guardian of the pyramidal cone asked Cadmus to heap a mound of earth over his corpse. All right? Uh-oh. Are we talking about Cadmus possibly being buried? Literally a real Cadmus in Wisconsin, huh? The rabbit that led Cadmus to the snake's lair was a guide sent to help him after he prayed for assistance from Artemis, the moon goddess. The Mud Lake rabbit effigy's position as a lunar symbol is identified by the crescent moon mount adjacent to it, all right? You guys hear that? It's everything. The whole story is right there in a physical, right? Manifestation of it, right? Right there. It's telling you where it happened. In Mesoamerica. So the story is literally just telling you where it's happening, just like we read in the other book. These stories are just referring to the Americas. In Mesoamerica, the hare was a companion and the messenger of the goddess of the moon, right? And in many nations, a trickster animal, right? The hare, just like Bugs Bunny, tricks are for kids, yeah. The trickster animal, the rabbit, silly wabbit. Ichels to the Mayas, that's the name, the rabbit, right? And Coyol Chauqui to the Aztecs. The rabbit, too, was buried beneath an earth mound by Cadmus, an offering to the serpent, just as it appears at Mud Lake. All right. Of the more than 10,000 effigies within the cultural parameters of Aztalan civilization, including Wisconsin, Upper Michigan, Eastern Iowa, and Northern Illinois, the Mud Lake Rabbit Mound is the only one of its kind and is therefore all the more significant in the apparent connection with the Cadmus myth. Only a very few snake effigies were known, one on the near north side of Chicago that survived at least partially in somebody's backyard until World War I, but never in conjunction with a hare figure, again emphasizing the Mud Lakes Mount's origins and ancient European themes, all right, seen in reverse. So-called Greek Cadmus came out of the real Egypt, right? Real Exodus, real Canaan. He came out of here. You're seeing it in reverse. They're duplicating this location as a myth in so-called Greek or Greece. Remember? And that's what's going on even with the hieroglyphics in fake Egypt. They're just replicating the stories. That's why they got corn and all these ancient American animals. The Anasazi, huh? The ancient ones. We're talking about. Okay. It's getting pretty good, right? It's getting pretty good, the reading. Let me make sure the music is not too loud. Okay. So lunar symbols in the Cadmus myth additionally reflect the leading religious motive at Rock Lake, because the sacred body of water, according to surviving Native American testimony, was consecrated to the moon goddess. We recall Aztalan's pyramid of the moon and the crescent moon artifacts found near the lake. They recur in the white crescent moon on the black cow that led Cadmus to the site of his new kingdom, which he named after the animal Boeotia. His dedication was made in the name of Artemis, the moon goddess, who sent the guiding bovine marked with her symbol, a crescent moon against its black hide representing the night sky. A no less extraordinary parallel occurs in the relative dating of the Cadmus myth to the early Greek Bronze Age around 1500 BC. The same date assigned by hydrological studies to the pyramidal structures at the bottom of Rock Lake. Remarkable too is the Canary Islands Blessed Isles connection linking Cadmus to the archaeological evidence at Lanzarote, suggesting the Atlantic origins of the Rock Lake civilizers. Atlantic origins, yeah, from here. The Phoenicians were famous as the foremost seamen of the ancient world, seafaring people, as from telling you included many nations. They circumnavigated the African continent 2,000 years before Vasco da Gama and are known to have traveled to the Canary Islands in a flotilla commanded by one of their most capable admirals, Hano. So, of course, they were everywhere because they came out of America. They had to cross Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, so they went all over the world, of course. But these expeditions took place centuries after the story of Cadmus was first told. Actually, the Phoenicians did not even exist as a people of any culture significance until after the pre-classical Bronze Age collapsed. All right, that's what we've been saying. You're grouping a bunch of people and calling them a nation, a seafaring people, society, possibly secret society. Around 1200 BC, for the next 500 years, Greece wallowed in a very real dark ages of terrible ignorance. All right, is the dark ages real? We got phantoms and duplicates. We got no archaeology for 300 years. Check out our false chronology series we got going. Let's research. Relieved eventually by the coming of literacy from Phoenicia, just as the arrival of Cadmus, the Phoenician implies, right? The arrival of Israelites, huh? They got their literacy, huh? But his myth clearly deals with events in the early Bronze Age, not as the opening of classical times, which people then did Cadmus actually represent, if not the Phoenicians. Who did he represent? We got it in the beginning, right? In most oral traditions as old as his, certain elements get confused in the retelling, a deterioration of detail aggravated by the long dark ages through which it had to pass in Greece, all right? So that's the hijack, dark ages. Until literacy was sufficiently restored, as at a reset, you restored after a reset to record the story in writing. It seems clear then that the Phoenician Cadmus, who arrived by sea, with parentheses, they got Phoenician, who arrived by sea to conquer the native Serpent Guardian and raise a new kingdom in Boeotia, belonged to that same unknown prehistoric race that civilized Minoan Crete, Troy, Mycenae, and the rest of the Aegean world, beginning in the late 4th millennium BC. Forgotten by the classical mythographers after the end of the Greek Dark Ages, they were assumed to have been Phoenicians for lack of any other known sea people, and thus erroneously presented as such in the person of Cadmus. And we got the whole drop based on what we just read, the background of all these people, the Minoan Cretes, the Troy, Mycenaean, and who were these people? Who funded Troy? That was the line of Judah, Darda, son of Judah, Darda, first king of Troy, Darda, from the line of Judah. This is what I'm telling you, related to Cadmus, yes. So-called Greeks, this is what I was saying. You can't generalize when you say Greeks or Greece, because it included many different nations. It became a culture. It became like a whole civilized, like saying a citizen. You're a Greek, like Roman citizen. Romans conquered many people. They glorified this history. There wasn't no great Greece or great Rome. They duped us into that when they created the false chronologies. But that's some drop right there. Okay. He represents the same ancient people, and he was an Israelite according to an ancient Greek, Theodorus himself. If we want to get it from a primary source, he said Cadmus was an Israelite coming out of the Exodus. The newcomer's takeover was exemplified in Apollo's struggle against Python, long regarded by scholars as the displacement of a native power by outsiders. Okay, listen, long regarded, okay, sorry. So too, Cadmus was directed by Apollo to defeat the snake guardian, defeat the snake or the snake people, just like St. George or Georgie, Danilovich, Genghis Khan, right? Just like St. George defeating the dragon or taking over an empire, the empire of the Prester or dragon. It also means Prester. Cometa, right? Comet. Are we talking about mythological beings and people or just die? Are we talking about nations versus nations taking over somebody's kingdom? Like they're saying here. Long regarded by scholars as the displacement of native power by outsiders, so too Cadmus was directed by Apollo to defeat the snake guardian, who himself proclaimed his identity as the last of the serpent people, the Khans. The Greeks always insisted that the race which came before them was the Pelasgians or sea peoples, born from the fangs of Ophion, the primeval serpent. Yet in the end, Cadmus and Harmonia were transformed into snakes, a strange fate for absolute foreigners. They were transformed or they became citizens. Huh? The implication, though, is that they are not entirely unrelated to the serpent people of the Guardian. After all, they're not. They're the same people. Yeah. All right. Who's in the chat? Who's in the chat? Hold on. Let's keep reading. One more page, and then I'll get a look at the chat. Cadmus appears to have belonged not to the historic Phoenicians, but to the far more dimly remembered. He's saying Pelasgians because that's what he's calling before. It has to be them. Nope. We already got Diodorus, a primary source from that time, supposedly, right? Or more precisely, to tribes of men who, in their far-flung sea rovings throughout the Mediterranean world over the centuries, became disassociated from the descendants of their own kinsmen, Israelite, who themselves settled numerous unaffiliated kingdoms in the Aegean and thus seemed almost like foreigners to one another. That's what I'm saying. It's been going on. The confusion. A similar development took place during Roman times, just like I said, just like Roman becoming a Roman citizen, when the Germanic peoples of Gaul and the Upper Rhine, although ancestrally bound to one another, split into many divergent tribes with their own distinct identities. It is crucial to determine the people represented in the person of Cadmus because they were most likely the original civilizers of Rock Lake. Listen, before Columbus, they were they call it sea people, earliest ancestors of the classical Greeks, and the same culture bearers, better remembered as the Minoans, Trojans, and Homer's Achaeans, or Achaeans. They voyaged far from their European homelands to obtain the mineral that fueled their Bronze Age, copper, which they found in sufficient abundance only at Michigan's Upper Peninsula and cleared through the mining town in Aztalan. All right, you guys hear that? In reverse, though, he's seen it in reverse. The visitors who today admire the tranquil beauty of Rock Lake do not suspect that 3,500 years ago, listen, determined men in gleaming armor from the Dasahaja, he's saying from the other side of the world, from this side, stood at this same body of water. But what those men saw now lies hidden beneath the surface. All right. And that was chapter 14. Hope you guys enjoyed chapter 14. We're going to go on to chapter 15, if you don't mind. If you guys enjoying the reading, give me a thumbs up and I'll continue. All right, next chapter is chapter 15. Can't see it. Chapter 15, there you go. Aztalan, the profane sacred center. Aztalan. Aztalan. So real quick, just get a reference. All right. New share. Go basic. So Aztalan. Aztalan State Park. All right, so we got mounds here in Wisconsin. It's called Aztalan Mound or Aztalan Archaeological Site. There's actually a lot more, but this is one of them. Aztalan State Park. All right. Is the site of an ancient Mississippian culture, all the way up there in Wisconsin. they're saying Mississippian, settlement that flourished during the 10th to 13th centuries, possibly even much older. The indigenous people constructed massive earthworks mounds for religious, political purposes. They were part of the widespread culture with important settlements throughout the Mississippi River Valley and its tributaries. Their trading network extended from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast and in the southeast of the present-day United States. Aztalan was first settled around 900 CE by Native American culture known as the Middle Mississippian tradition. The chief center of the Middle Mississippian settlement is at Cahokia. All right, so on and so on. Yeah, you guys got this cute, cool little map right here. Mississippian related cultures or one people. All right. So chapter 15, we got a lot of thumbs up, so we're gonna continue for sure. Thank you guys. Chapter 15, Aztalan, the profane sacred center. What cities as great as this have promised themselves immortality? Here stood their citadel, now grown over with weeds. And that's a quote from Goldsmith, whoever that is, in regards to Aztalan. Most Midwesterners, right, even residents of Wisconsin, are surprised to learn that their dairy state features its own authentically prehistoric pyramids, more properly known as the Temple Mounds. Temple Mounds, right? The two primary earthworks are part of Aztalan's archaeological park just south of I-94, some 50 miles west of Milwaukee. Visitors leave their cars in a lot beside a row of low, dome-shaped mounds, little more than unimpressive hillocks skirting a ridge. From them, the ground slopes gently eastward toward a line of trees concealing a tributary of the Rock River, the Crawfish. Beyond, rows of a tranquil landscape of farmlands and pastures. The first feature to catch the eye is an unusual high wall of wooden poles beginning in the direction of the river and running for about 200 feet before turning at right angles for another 50 feet or so. This rough palisade is very partial reconstruction made some 35 years ago to simulate the original fortification. A few posts have been slapped over with cement and wire mesh in crude imitation of the elegant mortar work that completely covered the original 12th century ramparts. Behind the walls stands a square earth mound, 20 feet across at its base, and popularly known as the Pyramid of the Moon. A mound of moon. Make me a mound of moon, just like the story of Cadmus, huh? Because of its lunar alignments. Looking south from its 11-foot high summit, visitors see the 21-acre extent of the ancient enclosure, a low grassland with a fragmented construction of the recreated ramparts. Near the southwest corner stands the larger temple mount known as the Pyramid of the Sun. Since Dr. James Schertz confirmed its winter solstice alignments, a flight of broad wooden stairs climbs up its western face to its 15-foot top, which provides the best perspective of Aztalan. These scant remains only dimly and inequally suggest the cultural splendor that once prevailed at this now peaceful place and leave modern visitors with scarcely an inkling of the human drama that occurred here. Thanks to the painstaking excavation and analytical research undertaken by surveyors and archaeologists since the 1830s, we now know much about the real story of Aztalan, but many of its most important secrets have yet to be learned. While views from atop the pyramid of the sun afford vistas of the whole site, they are misleading in some regards. What visitors see from this temple mount anciently comprised only the innermost hub of a political state, a nation, perhaps whose boundaries still indefinitely, sorry, could have stretched over most of what is now southern Wisconsin and into northern Illinois. Aztalan was the capital, citadel, or ceremonial center of this vanished power, traces of which were left only in the effigy mounds, more than 10,000 of them. which once stretched from Chicago to the upper Great Lakes, from the Mississippi River to Lake Michigan. Okay? Nor did inhabitants dwell only behind the high walls of their capital. Settlements spread out intermittently, perhaps contiguously, from the ceremonial center to the shores of Rock Lake, only 3 miles to the west and around Aztalan itself. The regional population might have risen as high as 10,000 residents. Certainly, a substantial laboring class resided in extended settlements just beyond and clustered around the imposing walls. As for the number of residents living within the enclosure, they probably numbered little more than 1,000. They were the elite, the royalty, astronomers, the shamans, leading craftsmen, organizers, and aristocracy of the land. Some idea of the importance of the persons living behind the walls is indicated by the 1,200 warriors necessary to man Aztalan's guard towers. In any case, the majority of people who were part of the Middle Mississippian culture center resided in the surrounding area and undoubtedly represented a figure several times greater than the privileged class within its protective battlements. Also, outside the fortification to the west arose a natural hill transformed by the ancient inhabitants to resemble a squat pyramid. It retains its shape to the present day. At its summit once stood an entirely man-made conical mound, 65 inches tall and 30 feet across its base. It contained a pit 30 inches in diameter that went down 4 feet to two slabs of shaped Ketlinite. One was 30 by 20 inches and 6 inches thick, the other 6 by 15 inches and 4 inches thick. The purpose of their curious arrangement remained unknown for 50 years after their discovery until Dr. Schertz demonstrated the astronomical features of Aztalan. It is now understood that the 4-foot deep pit atop the pyramidal hill once contained a wooden post used to form celestial alignments with other points of reference. The two stone slabs were removable, allowing the post to be raised or lowered for different orientations. But its purpose was not purely scientific, at least not as we understand the term. Cattle, much love, everybody tuned in. I see you guys in the chat. Thank you. We're on chapter 14 of this book again. If you want to get the previous drop, we got so much drop on this book. Right now it's talking about Aztalan, but we've done 13 chapters already in previous videos. I got the whole playlist together for you. All right. Catlinite was, and it still is, the most sacred mineral on Earth among all Native American tribes. The flesh-colored Pipestone was named after George Catlin. You guys hear that? The American painter who documented Native American life in the wild during the early 19th century. Catlinite, or Pipestone, is not native to southern Wisconsin. The nearest deposits occur in Rice Lake, more than 220 airline miles northwest of Aztalan. So the stone was unquestionably an import. Pipestone was and is deemed especially holy because it is believed to be the flesh. Listen to this. This is deep right here. All you mud flood researchers, listen to what I. So, Pipestone was and is deemed especially holy because it is believed to be the flesh of an ancient humanity transformed after the great flood. All right, are we talking about giants, the flesh of giants, body bag? All the mud flood researchers out there. I know you guys heard this and you saw people show, chunks of earth that look like flesh, like, wow. Listen to what they're telling you here. That's the legend, that's the myth matching what people are saying. I don't know if they know this stuff. They probably do. So, an ancient humanity transformed after the great flood, huh? Doesn't the flood all about giants, just getting rid of giants? And they turn into stone, just like the movie they did Noah, with Russell Crowe, I think, and they were stone, but look, they turned to stone, looking like flesh, right? Pipestone. That's deep right there. Wow. The presence of catlinite in this high mound implies that the hill possessed an extraordinary significance. Across the modern road from the farm on which the hill stands in the Greenwood Mound group, 5 conical earth structures lining a ridge above the Aztalan enclosure. They too possessed pits with stone walls at the bottom, although the walls were not Catlinite, flat platforms on which to raise or lower tall wooden posts. These determine various celestial phenomena, lunar phases, solstices, stellar positions, etc. The terraform hill, with its own mound and pole, was the focus of a central alignment which the Greenwood group used in the manner of a gun sight to aim at desired astronomical targets, hence its inclusion of Pipestone, as though the ancient astronomers sought particular blessing for their efforts from the gods. Long before Dr. Scher's discovery of Pipestone Hill, astronomical features, resident Indians preserved a recollection of its calendrical function in folklore. They told of the pinnacle grouse, a bird that flew in only one direction around the top of a conical hill, a bird or dragon. As it circled round and round, its plumage changed according to the seasons. From Serpent, huh? Many Native Americans still associate the grouse with the sacred spiral of the heavens, the dance of the stars, while the bird symbolizes sky phenomena in general, particularly the motivating spirit of celestial events. Huh, pretty deep. The pinnacle grouse appears to represent the animals of seasonal change as it flies continuously in a circle, the cyclical movement of time around the conical hill, the changing colors of its feathers corresponding to the alternating seasons marked by the post atop Pipestone. In fact, Dr. Scherz demonstrated that the most significant astral alignments at Aztalan, the Pyramid of the Sun's orientations with Christmas Hill across the Crawfish River, result in spiral coordinates. We are reminded, too, of the most common symbol recovered from Aztalan's artifacts, the spiral. Between Pipestone's Hill and the walls of Aztalan formerly sprawled a ridge-top mound resembling an elongated pyramid, 150 feet long, 18 feet wide at the base of 9 feet high. The tent-shaped feature ran on north-south axis, its southern end configured into a triangle, with the northern terminus tapered to a point. Although made of earth and covered with a cap of painted clay, the mound's similarity to stone structures found at the bottom of Rock Lake is worth noting. By the 1930s, only a dim outline of the unusual earthwork bore witness to its former existence. In the close vicinity of Aztalan were the effigy mounds of animals, identifiable objects, and curious designs, many of colossal proportions, and all sculpted from the earth, with a stylized finesse and a sophistication of technique precisely opposite to primitive. Many of the effigies reflected a sea or water motive, such as a turtle mound near the east bank of the Crawfish River, directly across the enclosure, or a 126-foot long oar running parallel to the south end of the outermost wall. These lively geoglyphs appear to have had astronomical significance as well. Dr. Scherz showed that the turtle mound played an important role in creating alignments for the winter solstice. The immediate area swarmed with effigies of many shapes and sizes, more than 70 altogether, of which only a tiny handful still survive. But in their heyday, they must have imparted a very special atmosphere of living magic to the ceremonial center. It was these writings, earth images, that a 13th century visitor to Aztalan would have encountered as he walked among the surrounding habitations of workers and artisans, traders and weavers, skinners and hunters, all in the hubbub of activity. But such scenes were certainly dominated by the 16-foot high walls that ran for more than a mile around through the entire complex. Their pastel white surfaces presented a solidly uniformed exterior, or solidly, sorry, because some of 2,000 gallons of lime plaster coated and completely covered the stockade of 11,000 logs. You guys hear that? They were painted white, the stockade. all around this whole complex. Listen, stones were used to reinforce gaps between some of them, and in their foundations where the ground was occasionally marshy. The high walls also possess a unique, unusual feature whose purpose is not definitely understood. Very large cauldrons of vats or fired clay pottery were stationed at intervals along the very top of the parapets. Perhaps they contained cane or some other flammable material and were used as fire beacons as part of ceremonial drama, or just literally light. Standing 4 feet higher than the walls, 150 guard towers. 150 guard towers. Listen, around the whole complex. 150 different towers, guard towers, right? Specifically, spaced apart every 15 feet, gave Aztalan a profound Trojan appearance. Hello, where's the real Troy? The square towers were provided with long, narrow windows from which archers could set up a withering crossfire on a besieging attacker with maximum protection. But Aztalan had no gates, no doors of any kind, yet people could pass through the walls with ease if they knew the secret. An entrance was cleverly concealed by one section of the wall, slightly overlapping the next section just behind it, creating an open, narrow space easily guarded from within while allowing access for only one person at a time. From even a short distance in front of the wall, the entrance could not be detected. Beyond the walls near the south end of the enclosure rests a large, somewhat oblong boulder, about 1.25 tons, and the only one of its kind at the site. When the recreated fortifications were being built in the 1950s, the big stone was moved by a bulldozer from its original position because it got in the way. No quote, to quote one of the workers, 30 years later, Dr. Schwartz discovered its original location by determining its role as an alignment marker for astronomical observations from the top of the pyramid of the sun. The stone is particularly provocative because the only other monoliths known to orient with important sky phenomena are the menhirs of Neolithic Europe. That's the only one of its kind anywhere else in the world, right? Similar megalithic alignments still exist along America's eastern seaboard, Mystery Hill being the most famous, all right? And the old European character of these structures likewise seems certain, right? Seen in reverse, America's Stonehenge, Mystery Hill, all that, seen in reverse. But the Aztalan monolith is special because it and Stone Circle and the Stone Circle at Goose Island, also 3 miles away from Rock Lake, in the west are the only such features west of the Alleghenies. Alleghenies, remember what we learned about the Alleghenies, that the real Mount Olympia? Huh. Remember the Alleghenies were much, much higher in ancient times. Not far from the toppled menhir's present position was a stone aqueduct that originally ran a great distance from east to west. When surveyed in the 1850s, little of it survived as testimony to the irrigation skills of the prehistoric inhabitants. Speculation has been rife ever since that the ancient aqueduct actually connected Aztalan with Rock Lake. You hear that? A phenomenal achievement for the pre-Columbian engineers. Once inside the walls, our 13th century visitor would have been astounded by the enclosure's contrast with the outside world. The foremost attraction was the Pyramid of the Sun near the southwest corner of the site, 71 square feet or 71 feet square at the base. It was a step pyramid rising in 2 layers and completely encased in a smooth, bright yellow clay cap. Wow. No mere heap of dirt. It was a skillful arrangement of gravel, red and white sand, mottled black earth, river mud, and fire hardened clay, all constructed to hold the pyramid's shape through centuries of erosional forces. You guys hear that? This mound wasn't just a mound, it had all that over it. And it looked like a stone pyramid. Or maybe that's what's underneath and they're just not excavating it, right? The exterior of the temple mound was profusely decorated with geometric designs. All right, listen to that. Geometric designs in which spirals predominated, painted in dark blue pigments extracted from vegetable fibers. A broad flight of wooden stairs rose from its base to the summit, which was crowded by an observatory shrine. Its walls were white stucco, and the very steep roof rose another 16 feet over the whole structure. Protruding even higher through the roof of dried prairie grass was a lofty red painted cedar pole anchored at the center of the building and into the top of the mound. Two doorways opened to the east and the west, accommodating the sun god's appearances in his rises and settings. From this privileged spot, the entire precinct could be surveyed at a glance. Two more walls bisected the enclosure, providing the residents with an even more effective defense. The trees, which today line the river banks and grow inside the archaeological zone, would have been absent during Aztalan's greatness, when they were felled for timber. Opposite the Pyramid of the Sun to the east was a natural knoll or gravel near a freshwater spring that supplied the community. Certainly, this feature played some ceremonial role and may have contributed to the location's choice as a sacred center. That water. Running north to the knoll, parallel to the riverbank, was the residential area. It had no streets as such, the houses only casually arranged without regard to city planning of any kind. There were two types of domiciles, the wall trench and the single post construction. In the former, a trench was dug around a spiral pattern in which posts were sunk and the house developed. Single post structures had their posts planted in the ground upon which the house was raised. Both kinds were mortared and wattled and daubed, a combination of moist clays and plant fibers. Fire was then applied to create strong insulation known as Aztalan brick. Aztalan brick. As further defense against the harsh winters, all the homes were oriented with their backs to the cold northwest winds. Roofs were made of thatch, each pierced by a smoke hole to allow ventilation for central hearth, around which were pole frame suspension beds covered with bear furs and deer skins. Each house was a single family dwelling for mother, father, three or four children, and sometimes grandparents. Evidence of regularly swept floors shows the ancient inhabitants were fastidious housekeepers, and some homes featured brick fire boxes that served as both heaters and ovens. Nearby were storage pits containing nuts, seeds, maize, right? Granaries, just like Joseph said. Hey, you got to store maize for 7 years. Corn, choked cherries, and berries. Meat was stored outside and included raccoon, buffalo, moose, muskrat, squirrel, beaver, rabbit, bear, deer, and elk. I include a lot of dirty animals there, right? Is that why we fell off? Favorite fowl included pigeons, swans, quails, ducks, reed birds, geese, turkeys, and teals. Hunting took place in a vast oak forest that stood across the river, and most game birds were found in marshes to the east and north. The inhabitants of Aztalan also consumed great quantities of pickerel, pike, perch, bullhead, catfish, bass, drum, gar, buffalo, fish, and suckers. Freshwater clams were likewise in demand. Large-scale harvests were effected in actual fish factories or stone weirs just beneath the surface of the Crawfish River, into which catches were driven and corralled. Remnants of at least one such factory may still be seen about a quarter of a mile south of the ceremonial center. Much of their food was processed for prolonged storage in large clay vats, while most of it was brought in as trade by Plains Indians from all over the southern Wisconsin area. In the northeast section of the site was another square mound. Atop it stood a temple 40 by 90 feet at the base. It housed ritual fire pits aligned with white sand, perhaps imported from the Florida Gulf Coast, specifically for cold purposes. After each ceremonial conflagration, The pits were refilled with a special white sand. The mound's counterpart in the northwest section is commonly known as the Pyramid of the Moon for its lunar alignments. It originally stood 9 feet high and measured 105 feet in length and more than 80 feet in width. The top was 60 by 40 feet and featured a crematorium 12 feet long by 5 feet wide on the west side of the mound. Arranged in a southwest northeast orientation, the 5 foot tall structure covered 2 foot deep trench lined with a large mat of woven cattail rushes. Into this pit, the human remains of 10 adults, male and female, were laid in a row on their backs and extended positions. The log structures and its interred dead were then ritually burned to ashes. Much later, an 11th burial or human bones wrapped in a bundle was included. After the fire ran its course, another and final level of the mound was heaped over the crematorium. While there is no physical evidence for a temple building atop the pyramid of the moon, its absence would certainly have been out of character with the other two earth mounds, which both feature sacred structures. So most investigators assume the Northwest Pyramid did indeed have its own temple, similar to the others. And like the others, the mound was probably capped by a hard layer of smooth clay decorated with geometric designs. Between the Pyramid of the Moon and that of the Sun was a broad, open area of or plaza for public assemblies and sports events such as ritual ball games, which symbolically simulated the movements of the sun and moon appropriately enough. Midway between the two months and abutting the plaza was a broad ramp of earth and posts that sloped to the top of the walls, presumably to allow large numbers of defenders to man their stations in the shortest possible time. At the center of the south end of the enclosure was a large pool of clear water shaped in a triangular configuration. As Increase Lapham, the early 19th century surveyor who saw the pool, remarked, perhaps the bottom may have been rendered watertight by artificial means. Its purpose may have been a great deal more significant than bathing, and almost certainly served ritual purposes. The triangle pool's apex pointed due north, toward a low-roofed rectangular building, stored with tons of raw, high-grade copper. At the exact center of Aztalan was a pair of adult human skulls, both upside down, side by side, and in a pit precisely oriented east and west. It seems hardly likely, wrote S. A. Barrett, the chief archaeologist who excavated the skulls in 1933, that they were carelessly cast into this pit and fell accidentally in these positions. It seems more probable that they were purportedly placed in these positions for some reason. The skulls imply, however, that Aztalan was a sacred center, an implication reinforced by their east west orientation as symbolic of a spiritual crossroads or midpoint. This interpretation is reinforced by their discovery of the precise center of the enclosure. While the two skulls and 11 other persons interred in the pyramids of the moon represent the only ritual burials behind Aztalan's wall, a few others took place in their shadow, just beyond the enclosure. A conical mound of gravel covered the bodies of two boys, one 10, the other 5 years old, laid out full length on their backs, with their lower limbs slightly flexed. They were covered with the large carapace of a turtle that had been worked into some kind of dish or tray. The shell was imported from the Gulf of Mexico. All right, you hear that? Or the real Red Sea, the Red Sea. Doubtless, the children were somehow special deemed worthy of a unique interment, and may have been brothers who helped to a privileged family, perhaps the Lord of Assalan himself, and might therefore have been princes, or they could have been sacrifices to consecrate Assalan in its inception. As Barrett wrote, in every way the burial showed considerable age. conceivably going back to the foundation of the town. Interestingly, boy sacrifice or the substitution of piglets for boys occurred in Neolithic Europe to consecrate megalithic structures such as Stonehenge. The best known example takes place in the story of Merlin, when as a youth he was threatened with ritual execution to hallow a particular site. Alright? While the boys buried at Aztalan may or may not have been princes or princesses, was indeed discovered about 300 feet north of the enclosure, so named after the extraordinary funeral garb of a young adult woman found under an earthen conical mound originally 6 feet high and 30 feet across. Hers was the most elaborate prehistoric grave ever excavated in North America above the Rio Grande, belonging to a 28-year-old female. The corpse had been carefully wrapped in full-length bark envelope, long since rotted away, and accompanied by numerous perishable objects, grave goods to honor the deceased, that only left faint, unintelligible traces in the soil. The woman was clothed in a fabulous gown hung with three woven belts of individually cut, brightly polished, mother of pearls around her shoulders, waist, and cowls. Remember, we've got so many accounts of this same burial. Kings, queens being buried with copper crowns, pearls all over them. These aren't just regular people. These aren't, just any kind of burials or simple people. These are civilized people, right? Just like the so-called Egyptians, right? And all these ancient cultures in the fake old world. They're finding all that right here, what they're reading about in mythology. Some of the shells used in the production of her gown were imported from the Gulf of Mexico or the real Red Sea, and all were separately fashioned into squares, rectangles, or circles. Her necklace was comprised of 585 beads, okay? 846 went into her belt, with 547 for the calf belt. Listen, altogether 1,978 individual pieces were sewn into her garment. We're talking about pearls, guys, pearls. That's how many she had on. If this impressive raiment was not exclusively funeral and occasionally worn by the woman in life, she could have counted upon for some spectacular personal appearances. Wow, 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 wow. Hold on, guys. In any case, the Beaded Princess hints at the grandeur and drama that was long ago celebrated in Aztalan. An additional 18 polished shell beads were tossed into her grave by mourners as they buried her, behavior completely contrary to the burial customs of the Plains Indians. Not like them. The princess was herself a strange specimen. Her 5 foot 7 inch skeleton belonged to a woman unusually tall for most Native Americans of her sex. Gosh, the hijack. Remember what they're finding in the mounds? Talking about giants, 7 footers, 8 footers. So what do you mean? That's his opinion right here. Normally she would have stood almost 6 feet, but her spine was badly deformed. Obvious abnormalities often convinced tribal societies that such misshapen persons had been singled out by the gods for special powers and insights, qualifying them as religious leaders. Given the details of her burial, the princess was more likely a highly honored shaman. Very few other graves have been found in the vicinity of Aztalan. One contained the remains of an exceptionally tall man. Exceptionally tall man. We're talking about giants. See what I'm saying? His corpse had originally been placed reverentially on a mat of woven reeds and accompanied by some single grave goods, pottery, and bags of acorn. These honored circumstances were in sharp contrast to the otherwise good condition of the body. It had been decapitated before interment. Only three other graves covered by animal effigy mounds across the Crawfish River had been found. In fact, all graves in the Aztalan area seem to represent exclusive ritual burials. The cemetery used by the prehistoric residents has never been identified, and how they dispose of their dead continues to mystify investigators. If cremation was the method of disposal, no evidence for it exists other than the remains of only 11 persons in the Pyramid of the Moons. There are many enigmas in this strange place. When excavated, a ridge-top mound beyond the northern wall was found to contain a square chamber lined with walls of birch bark. It contained nothing but a 162-pound rock. When shown to Ho Chunk elders, that's an Indian tribe, right? The Ho Chunk, they recoiled in horror from the spirit stone and offered no further explanation. Another object dug up near the Pyramid of the Sun has never been explained, made of highly polished chert, a very fine grained, tough stone composed mainly of silica. It is beautifully formed, almost perfect square. The four sides measure 38, 37, 38, and 40 millimeters, and it is 5 millimeters thick. A great deal of precision work went into creating the object, whatever its purpose. Only scraps remain of the colorful textiles manufactured by the ancient inhabitants for clothing, and few of their personal ornaments have been recovered. One prize find is a triangular pendant of copper. More of their tools still exist, and these include finely made axes, hammers, chisels, drills, spades, and levers, all testimony to a creative, industrious people. They were ingenious workers in natural materials, as exampled in the holes they made from milkstone, which not only conformed perfectly for use as a tool, but whenever damaged always fractured along lines that kept its shape. Milkstone is not native to Wisconsin and must have been brought in from Illinois. The people of Aztalan operated a trading network that stretched for thousands of miles in each direction, largely for the importation of shells or ornamentation or religious practices, such as the turtle carapace from the Gulf of Mexico, used as a grave good in the boys' burial. Some of these imported mollusk shells included specimens from Georgia's Atlantic coast, Key West, Florida, and the West Indies, the Ohio Valley, Central America, and Cape Cod. All right, you guys hear the network we're talking about? So from there, it extended even further, right, from those points. They employed the Florida conch, penultimately the largest in the Gulf region and used by the civilizers of Aztalan and Mesoamerican ceremonial centers alike as a trumpet. Many of these luxury goods were brought to Aztalan from great distances in exchange for calendrical information provided by the astronomers, who could tell farmers when to plant or harvest what crops at the optimum time, or give them a timetable for some particular ritual activity meant to win favor from the gods. This is what they're guessing, right? Near the inner bank, at the south end of the site, the outermost wall actually extended out into the outrushing Crawfish River, thereby including a portion of the stream within the village confines, where it was used for purposes of irrigation. Close by this extension was a spring of fresh water, 22 feet long and 10 feet wide, carefully paved with that or with flat stones that ran in a line into the compound. Both here and at the site of another spring a mile north of Astalan, the pavement stones were laid out into the water itself. Virtually nothing is known about the physical appearance of the people of Astalan. That's the hijack. What we don't know what they look like. We don't want. Let's not even talk about it. Save that they were regarded as foreigners by the whole chunk, right? And as white bearded men by the Menominee, white bearded old men. At least a certain strata of their population practiced skull elongation, in which infants had their heads strapped between the cloths or two cloth-covered boards. After the first year of growth, the head was sufficiently deformed, probably for aesthetic reasons, which likewise indicates the existence of a social upper class. Aztalan was far more than a settlement, however. It was a mining town, through which flowed enormous quantities of raw copper, listen, shipped down from the upper Great Lakes. The miners wintered in Aztalan, planted their crops in the spring, traveled to work Michigan's copper mines during the summer, and returned to harvest their crops in the fall. To regulate all these activities, which were strictly circumscribed by the seasons, an accurate and reliable conception of time was imperative. To this end, numerous, even redundant solar, lunar, and stellar alignments were calculated, and the temple mounds became points of reference from which multiple celestial phenomena could be studied simultaneously. The Greenwood group of dome-shaped mounds, with their adjustable center posts, ranged themselves along the skyline as solstices, eclipses, phases, equinoxes, astral cycles, Venusian recurrences, constellations and position, and all manner of heavenly data accumulated behind the high walls of the sacred center, all right? The sky right there in physical form on the ground. People traveled great distances to learn what to do for their crops, when to risk a journey by water, listen, when to marry or relocate, like a horoscope, hey, let's go see what it says here. In exchange for such critically important information, they brought goods from throughout and far beyond the Mississippi Valley. Aztalan's astronomer priest obtained latitude measurements using North Star and figured the declination of the sun 23.5 degrees. Mud Lake's Rabbit Mound, whose parallel lunar symbolism in Maya and European Bronze Age myths has been examined previously, was positioned to look at a conjunction of the new moon and a trio of planets, while the nearby snake Effigy marked sunrise at the winter solstice. One second, guys. My dog's here over here playing around. Come on, Molly. Come on, Molly. All right. Thank you, guys. All right. One second. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I just let my dogs out. They were getting crazy. They probably wanted to go out. So it says these and abundant additional observations did not develop overnight in Aztalan. Astronomy and all the other skills of government, pyramid building, agriculture, irrigation, and social organization arrived suddenly and fully evolved in southern Wisconsin around AD 1100. And for 200 years, the people of Aztalan flourished while their fame spread throughout the middle Mississippian culture, of which they were the leading exponents. Listen to that. Hey, Millennials Best, thank you, appreciate that. Okay, where was we? But sometime before their bicentennial, a segment of their society degenerated into the horrors of a death cult. Huh, they fell off, huh? Evidence has been recovered of more than 800 persons cannibalized behind the walls of Aztalan toward the close of its existence. That I've never read about, and how do they know they were cannibalized? Hmm. Doubtless many more grisly remains still lie under the blood-soaked grounds of the enclosure, discovered in the kitchen middens together with turkey bones and bear claws, where human femurs cracked open to remove the edible marrow. Huh, was that the giants doing that? Listen to this. Whether the abominable practice was confined to some ritualizing group or contributed to an internal schism that brought society to an end is uncertain. but reliable, abundant carbon dating confirms that Aztalan was suddenly consumed in a single, massive conflagration that reduced the entire site to cinders. You see that? He's saying there was a major catastrophic or something happened in one moment that reduced this entire site to cinders. The once prosperous ceremonial center must have burned for days, illuminating the surrounding area with its cataclysm and turning the Catfish River that flowed by its blazing walls into a torrent of garishly reflected flame. Wow. For the next 500 years, its charred ruins were forsaken by local Plains Indians who shunned dead Aztalan as profane ground. Thus ended the strange story of a mysterious people and their ancient city in Wisconsin. But memory of them would continue to haunt their sacred lake to the present day. Wow. So we got a whole inside story on Aztalan, right? We're going to look into what happened to Aztalan, huh? Just like all these cities in the 1800s burned, right? Was that a Dracan burning the whole town? Yeah. So that was the end of chapter 15. Let me get a thumbs up. You guys want me to continue chapter 16? It's not as long as chapter 15. I think we can read it pretty quick. You guys let me know if you want to continue. Appreciate everybody that's been tuned in since the beginning. All right. And again, we're reading the book, The Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake, Wisconsin's Sunken Civilization. And we read chapter today 14 and 15. And now we're in chapter 16. We read everything already in the previous videos or in previous videos. And we got the playlist for you if you haven't checked them out. All right. I don't see the thumbs up. Okay, we're seeing thumbs up. All right. Go on. All right. Go on. What's up, family? Okay. Chapter 16. It says here, Tiranena, sunken city of the dead. And so just to go back real quick, what we were showing earlier. All right. He did a whole chapter on this. Hold on. Sorry, guys. He did a whole chapter on this that we read. So we got Tiranena in Wisconsin, and then we got Tirajena or Tirajena in the Canary Islands, which he linked up. It's the same people, it's the same, coming from the same source. All right, Tiranera Park or Tiranera, Wisconsin. So, chapter 16, Tiranena, sunken city of the dead. So many great nobles, kings, administrators, so many brave nations, so many proud princes, and power so splendid. In a moment, a twinkling, all utterly ended. And that was Jacopane, whoever that is. That was a quote. He's saying that's what happened in us, here in Wisconsin, in Tiranena. All right, we're going to read about it. Discoveries made beneath Rock Lake, anciently known as Tiranena, all right, that now remember, that's what it was anciently called there, that area, by the local indigenous people, Tiranena, share many similarities with comparable features excavated in Aztalan. The prehistoric settlement is, after all, only 3 miles east of the lake, so we do not assume too much when we speculate that the waters were familiar to Wisconsin's pre-Columbian inhabitants. More pertinent to our subsurface quest, parallels between Aztalan and finds made under Rock Lake lend credibility to the existence of a ruined civilization lying at its bottom. Among the most obvious and valid of those parallels begins with the 100-foot long structure discovered by sonar in 1989. Since known as the Limatus Pyramid, it is a tent-like stone mound 60 feet down and oriented along the north-south axis of the edge of the lake's oldest former shore. Until its destruction before 1930, a ridgetop mound virtually identical to its sunken counterpart, save only that it was made of earth and clay, lay in the shadow of Aztalan's western wall. Additionally, running parallel to the underwater mound along the lake's modern eastern shoreline and lying identically on a north-south axis was an earth mound 135 feet long and entirely comparable to the Limnatis pyramid. Obviously, ridge-top mound building continued in an unbroken chain of monumental construction from the land to what is now the bottom of Rock Lake, since structures identical in design and sites appear both around the lake and beneath it. The divers of Michael, the divers of Michael Kutza's group in 1968, like Richard Boyd's underwater expedition a few years later, uncovered caches of mollusk shells, two separate ridge-top buildings at the bottom of Rock Lake. On dry land at the south shore of the lake, a conical earth mound 5 feet tall and 10 feet across at the base, excavated around 1900, was found to contain similar cache of clam shells stored as grave goods in a human burial of ashes, bones, and skulls. The ancient inhabitants of Aztalan went to great lengths to import specially sought after mollusks for ornamental and ritual purposes from as far away as the Atlantic seaboard, the Florida Gulf Coast, and the West Indies. The most ornate burial in pre Columbian America north of Mexico belonged to the so called Beaded Princess. Right? Remember, she had about 1,900 beads on her, pearls, entombed outside Aztalan's enclosure. Her splendid gown comprised nearly 2,000 mother of pearl pendants handcrafted from mollusk shells. Clearly, shell was a valuable commodity that was at least partly associated with mortuary ceremonies, and today, as revealing artifact, it draws illuminating comparisons between the burial structures around the shores of Rock Lake and on its bottom. All right, on its bottom. So then they're showing a little rock structure found there. Says the mounds of the Greenwood Group just northwest of Aztalan's enclosure are more dome-shaped than conical, but their summits were pierced by deep shafts to accommodate alignment posts. So too, some of the conical structures found under the lake are hollow at the top. The subsurface pyramids are even lined up in a north-south row, like the Greenwood Group members. These earthworks enclose a cement-like cone of mixed clay and gravel, recalling Max Noll's description of the cone-shaped pyramid he discovered. Its round stones bonded by a kind of cement under the south end of Rock Lake. Perhaps dozens of similar conical structures once spread from Michigan's Upper Peninsula down into southern Wisconsin. Rock Lake's two effigy mounds located by side-scan sonar in 1989 represent a continuation of the same geoglyphs that surrounded the lakeshore and Aztalan itself. The sunken figures appear to be made of stone and are oriented almost precisely on an east-west axis side by side. One in the image of a turtle, stylized in the fashion of animal earth sculpture common throughout prehistoric Wisconsin. Its companion depicts a headless man. Both are about 6 feet long and just as wide and lie 18 feet beneath the surface. The turtle effigy is exemplary proof that human activity did indeed take place many centuries ago and on what has long since become the bottom of Rock Lake. This important piece of evidence is reinforced by the documented previous existence of another earthen turtle mound that was located on dry land, the modern shoreline, and exactly parallel to the sunken effigy, until its destruction in the 1920s when the boat landing and beach were installed. Listen, the underwater effigy was separated on a straight east-west line from its land-bound counterpart by 1/4 of a mile. Just across the Crawfish River from Aztalan lies a 600-foot-long turtle mound, aligned with features behind the enclosure to determine astronomical data. The locations of these figures, depicting as they do an aquatic animal near the banks of the Crawfish River, on the present coast of Rock Lake, and at its prehistoric subservience shoreline, all confirm the significance of their positions as intended by their creators. Beyond the west bank of the Crawfish, a pair of young boys were respectfully entombed under a large turtle shell. The resident Plains Indians equated the turtle with cowardice, braggadocio, obscenity, and human frailty, characteristics which would not make it eligible for memorialization as ceremonial mounds or as honored burial goods. All right, so what Plains Indians and according to who, and is that the story of all Indians in America? The creature obviously meant something entirely different to the builders of Aztalan, a difference that apparently extended to their ethnic identity. Because of its ability to survive in both water and on land, the prehistoric culture bearers more likely regarded the turtle as a living symbol of spiritual transformation from earth to the afterlife, which finds its human archetype in water, and especially among sacred lakes, such as interpretation, such an interpretation of the animal's ancient significance is lent credence by the Crawfish River Colossal Turtle Mound, which is oriented 23.5 degrees south of east and declination of the sun north of the equator of the solstices. The solstices are universally regarded in higher cultures as the most dramatic moments of seasonal change, paralleling human birth, life, death, and rebirth. The inclusion of a specially imported turtle shell to serve as spiritually valuable grave good in the burial of the two Asalan boys reaffirms the animal's identity as a symbol of transition from worldly existence to the afterlife. In any case, the turtle mounds stretching from the underwater to the land graphically trace a common cultural pattern running unbroken from the bottom of Rock Lake to Aslan itself. The headless man mound is no less significant. It is unique among Wisconsin effigies, save for one other example on land, but 3 miles due east, in the immediate vicinity of Assalan, north of its enclosure, lay the grave of a male skeleton, minus a skull. Everything about the burial suggested an honored, ritualized interment, just as the headless figure in the lake probably signified a mystery religion related to the so-called Southern Death Cult that was associated with the mound builders and flourished until the 14th century throughout the Mississippi Valley. All right, that's the hijack. Are we talking about Little Egypt? The position of Rock Lake's headless man mound, directly adjacent to the turtle effigy, symbol of the soul's transition from physical existence to the spirit realm, could not be more appropriate. Together with the other turtle mound facing them on shore, they almost formed a kind of hieroglyphic we may read thusly: the turtle soul on the land, the physical world, moves into the waters of transformation, where death, the headless man effigy, makes the transition to new life, the subsurface turtle mound. The three figures combine to identify Rock Lake as a sacred center, where rites of a mystery religion dedicated to principles of an afterlife were celebrated. That's what he's saying, right? The effigies likewise define the lake as a necropolis, a city of the dead, where the pyramid forms were heaped up as memorials to persons of distinction. Astalan's elaborate gravesites, the Beaded Princess, the Headless Man, the Two Princes, etc., extended directly from the mortuary magnificence of Rock Lake's stone monuments. It was among those conical, donut-shaped, and ridge-top structures and the honored dead they entombed that the rites and ceremonies of a rebirth cult occurred, with all the colorful pageantry suggested in the material magnificence of Astalan. The ancient cemetery of Astalan has never been identified. Only 15 or so burials were found in and around the enclosure, and those were exclusively of a ritualized character. Investigators need look no further for that cemetery than Rock Lake. More than 70 known burial mounds surrounded its shores until the early 20th century. They contain human bones and ashes, evidence in both inhumation and cremation, the same dual funeral practices which took place in Aztalan. The Wisconsin archaeologists reported that many skeletons were taken from mounds at Rock Lake and forwarded to the U.S. Army Medical Museum. Huh, these giants. A very large mound, possibly a natural hill, formerly occupied a position at the south end of the lake. As it was being demolished to make way for the railroad trestle, many hundreds, probably thousands of human bones were uncovered and removed. Thousands, all right? The same issue of the Wisconsin archaeologists described these coastal burial mounds as conical and linear, the identical configuration spotted by divers in the lake. And like the sunken ridge-top stone structures, their correspondents on dry land were aligned in north-south direction. Even their dimensions, 135 feet long, 8 feet tall, and 20 feet wide, compare very closely to the underwater monuments. It seems clear then that Aztalan's missing cemetery is rock lakes, both along its shores and beneath its waves. Indeed, the apparent symbolism of its turtle and headless man mounds strongly imply its identity as a sacred necropolis. The material evidence of the land stretching from Aztalan to the edge of the lake overlaps the subsurface evidence so precisely that no other conclusion seems possible. As though additional confirmation were necessary, an effigy mound described by the Wisconsin archaeologists as a water spirit form. The water spirit, we got this in my Wakanda, our original Black Panther Wakanda video, the original, the water spirit. That's what Wakanda, like, it's all related, right? Used to lie 84 feet along the south shore of Rock Lake, near the large burial hill, before it too was obliterated. Its erect head was 10 feet wide, rising from 24-foot long body with a 60-foot long tail. Wow. Front and near limbs were 15 feet across. Its enormous size and appropriate symbolism, a water spirit, and this was like a jaguar like mount, like it was like a cat figure. I remember now. Clearly demonstrated the holy regard in which the prehistoric residents held the lake a sanctified resting place for their dead. Both their effigy mounds and various types of monumental structures formed an unbroken line from the land into the lake. But the closest underwater comparison with Aztalan is the great triangle in the middle of Rock Lake's south end. The delta-shaped formation may be a mound, although its construction materials, whether clay or stone, are unknown. It nonetheless constitutes some of the best evidence for Wisconsin's sunken civilization, right? During its prehistoric prime, hold on. During its prehistoric prime, Aztalan's walls enclosed a large pool configured into a triangle. Like its far greater rock lake counterpart, it was located in the middle of the south end of the site with its apex pointed due north. Both may have been constructed together at the same time to establish some mystical correspondence between the lake and the ceremonial center. The Tira Nena Delta Mount was possibly a sacred pool, the same function observed in Aztalan's triangle. Their esoteric relationship suggests a sharing of common elements, linking the lake to the settlement, thereby confirming both as actually two aspects of a single common sacred center, belonging simultaneously to the water and the land rather than separate places unrelated to each other. The Rock Lake and Aztalan Delta formations are duplicated at only one other location on Earth, all right, in coastal Peru, among the famous Nazca lines, among the Peruvians. All right, I got a whole other corroboration here, guys, that we've gone into. We're gonna get it definitely more into. Shout out to Joseph Joe, studying the Southwest people and their connections to the ancient world. The Rock Lake, sorry, created by clearing away surface stones to expose the underlying sand. The drawings include recognizable zoomorphic shapes and abstract geometrical designs. Among the latter is 300-foot long triangle. Like its Wisconsin counterpart, its apex points due north. It is difficult to dismiss the widely separated sites as the fortuitous coincidence of wholly unrelated peoples. because the Ecuadorian Kanadi, this is what I was telling you earlier, the Ecuadorian Kanadi, that's a tribe, the Kanadi, haha, right, sounds just like canary, right? Canary Island, the Kanadi, and it's something related with dogs. It has something to do with dogs. Had intense commercial relations with both coastal Peru, where Chincha, their capital city, was located, and Rock Lake Aztalan. So too, Aztalan had trade connections at least as far south as Central America. All right, so these Ecuadorian Kanadi are Chipchan speaking people, Chipchan culture. Shout out to the Chipchan people out there. The Peruvian parallel with prehistoric Wisconsin underscores arguments on behalf of the Aztalaners as far ranging copper barons with vital links throughout the Americas. The implication of the cold turtle, at once embodying the water world of the land world, seems all the more valid and applicable to the spiritual symbolism apparently at work here. There are additional comparisons forged in Aztalan's profound link with Rock Lake. The whole chunk preserve a tribal memory of ancient days when shamans of the foreign chiefs pretended to walk across the surface of the lake at night. Listen, carrying torches in their outstretched hands, seeking to deceive and overawe the common people. The shamans were said to have accomplished the trick by walking on stepping stones placed just below the surface. The same performances may have taken place in Astalan, where pavement running out into the just beneath into and just beneath the surface of a fresh spring pool were detected by archaeologists in the 1930s. Similarly paved arrangements were found a mile or so north of Astalan, on the same bank of the Crawfish River. These discoveries tended to validate the Native American tradition and establish another revealing connection between alleged activities at Astalan and Rock Lake, where the water walking show probably occurred along the tops of a linear mound lying inches below the surface. But the larger features, such as the 100-foot long limnatus pyramid, would still have been under 40 feet of water. All right? They sit on the edge of the lake's oldest shoreline, which dates back to before 1500 BC and were undoubtedly constructed by the area's first civilizers. It was the copper miners who raised the colossal monuments using stones from a nearby river and other concretions left by the retreating glacier that carved out Rock Lakes 5,000 years before. Much love, Susan. Appreciate you. Thank you. You're very welcome. Even centuries after their sudden departure in 1200 BC, the site they abandoned was regarded throughout the Middle West and probably beyond a particularly venerable sacred center. Over time, it took on mythic proportions in the minds of generations of Native Americans. Rock Lake was by no means unknown to the culture bearers who decided upon a location for Astalan, just east of the lake. On the contrary, its fame certainly played a major role in their selection of the banks of the Crawfish. The river at that time, AD 1100, better facilitated ship traffic. That time, ships can be, you know, navigate on them because the waterway systems had shifted away from Rock Lake in the more than 2 millennia since its role in the ancient copper trade. Perhaps the structures under the lake were built by two different peoples living at two distinct periods of time, separated by more than 2,000 years, but united in the enduring sacredness of the place they chose for their population center. All right. And that was the end of chapter 16. All right. We are in, well, we're 2 hours in. We're going to most likely end it right there. We ain't doing the vote. So we can just get people to watch, sit down the videos. We don't want to make them too long. I've made them kind of long. We got 3 more chapters to go. We'll put that in another part, most likely part 5. A lot of great info. Still, we're reading from the book, even at the later chapters. I hope you guys enjoyed the reading. Very revealing information. This whole history they left out, from our textbooks. you know, the true old world. And people be like, wow, pyramids in Wisconsin. They be thinking Wisconsin like up there in the boonies. And no, there was a lot of ancient sites here, a lot of indigenous, ancient networking, commerce, trade, migration, civilizations going on all over the Americas. This is just one of them. This is just one of them. The back says, discover the mystery beneath Rock Lake. The sunken tombs and temples of Rock Lake comprise North America's latest and possibly greatest archaeological mystery. The author has done a marvelous job delving into the underwater mystery. His new book is unique adventure scuba divers and armchair explorers alike will find enthralling and exciting. All right, so we did get a lot of good drop in the previous chapters. Again, I have the whole playlist ready for you. I just posted it on my community wall, or just go to my playlist tab on my homepage. You'll see it. Should be one of the first to pop up. The Lost Pyramids of Rock Lake. All right. So that's the book, chapters 14, 15, and 16. You guys are awesome. You guys are reading so many books. We're getting through so many books. We're almost done with this one. We're almost done with the other ones. And there's so much, many more to read, right? Thanks for tuning in, all of you. Anybody who was here since the beginning, appreciate you doing that. I know it's not easy sometimes, live, and you're doing things. So thank you for that. Thanks to anybody who donated. Thanks to all my Patreons. Anybody supporting me all these years, all the real ones out there. Appreciate you guys always. All right. Appreciate you guys always. We're gonna go out with a little jam here. A little jam. Let me see. Where'd it go? Hawa, Hawa, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Pura vida. Yeah. Wow, wow. I see you guys. I see you in the chat. I see you. I see you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Hold on. But yeah, much love and respect. Yeah, mi gente, pura vida, pure life, pura vida. Thanks for tuning in. Wow, wow. Hold on. Pull up. Hold on. We ain't ready. Pull up. Here we go. Wow. Yeah! Oh man! Oh man! Oh wow! Yeah!